New Zealand is one of the most beautiful places in the world, but also one of the most isolated. With an economy based on innovation and exports, its success in the global marketplace relies on being connected to the rest of the world.
New Zealand is well served for international connectivity capacity through subsea cables, with the Southern Cross Cable Network, Tasman Global Access Cable, and the Hawiki Cable connecting New Zealand to the rest of the world. This YouTube video is stored in one of Google's data centers. YouTube's website sent this web page in small broken up packets of bytes, thousands of miles through internet infrastructure in the forms of cables, phone lines, optic fibers, and satellites, before putting it back together and reaching you through Wi-Fi or broadband within a second. How often do you watch videos on YouTube? When did you last upload a video onto the site? Now, when was the last time you thought about the copyright implications of any of those videos? Most people have probably never contemplated the significance of copyright law with respect to YouTube, and that is where the trouble begins, because copyright law is not caught up with the modern means of creation
completely taking over our
on the
culture and
internet.
telling us that we can only consume it, and we're saying no. We're saying we want to actually create with it, respond to it, take it, mutilate it, cut it up. We're saying, you don't ask us whether I want to have a billboard everywhere I go in my town. You don't ask me if I want to see your Nike logo everywhere I go. You don't ask me if I want to hear YouTube's music everywhere I go shopping or when I eat in a restaurant. So why do I need to ask you to take a little bit of it and make something out of it and make fun of you, critique you? Why do I need to ask?
There are rules of the game. There's a copyright. You have to get permission. You know, I can't go and walk I can't walk in your house and just sit down on your couch and go to your refrigerator and take a glass of milk out.
Kiwis love to create, access, and share content on social media platforms, streaming services, and in other ways over the internet. Many of those services didn't exist when New Zealand's Copyright Act 1994 was enacted over 2 decades ago. Since then, digital developments have created a range of new opportunities to share and access copyrighted works. Copyright affects all New Zealanders. We create copyrighted works when we take a photo, record a video, or write an email. And we use copyrighted works by watching a sports broadcast, streaming a movie, listening to music, or reading a book. New Zealand Congress did recognise the necessity of updating New Zealand's copyright law with the Copyright New Technologies Amendment Act 2008. These changes were influenced by media corporations and aligned organisations, proposed by New Zealand artists, technology specialists, internet server providers, businesses, librarians, and members of the public. Prime Minister John Key stated that the stronger copyright laws, including the controversial Section 92A, were required for New Zealand to be able to negotiate a free trade agreement with the United States. The new copyright provisions were also part of the government's goal of promoting innovation, creativity, and economic growth. The controversial Section 92A required internet server providers, known as ISPs, to adopt a process for disconnecting internet access of users suspected of repeat copyright infringement. The definition of ISP would include any person providing connections for digital online communications or hosting material on electronic retrieval systems, making schools, government departments, and businesses all potentially accountable as an ISP. Section 92A would mean ISPs would have to cut off access and take down web pages on the basis of accusation of copyright infringement, rather than face legal action from copyright holders. The controversial law sparked a protest led by the Creative Freedom Foundation and became known as the Internet Blackout Campaign. Internet users changed the avatar to black squares. On the 19th of February 2009, around 200 people protested and presented a petition outside Parliament.
Until now, the public's been able to go to the local library and browse without leaving their details.
The members of the jury have unanimously agreed upon the verdicts.
Who understand that if we mobilize our voices to challenge the money and influence that stood in our way and challenge ourselves to reach for something better. is no problem we cannot solve. There is no destiny that we cannot fulfill.
I'm going to speak very briefly because I want to be sure I get this in time for it to be presented this afternoon. First of all, it's great to see all the blacked out faces. I've done it on my Facebook site, and I think it's important that we all take a stand on this issue. Few people started agitating, and a few people became a few people more, and gradually a huge groundswell was built up. And the lesson of the Electoral Finance Act was that Parliament took too long to listen. With Section 92, we cannot afford to make the same mistake. I want to tell you that yesterday I met with Simon Power and separately with the Prime Minister to discuss the issue. They are well aware of it, and I'm pushing them to heed the call to take the action that you're seeking and to dump Section 92A altogether.
On the 23rd of March 2009, John Key announced that Section 92A of the Copyright Act will not come into force as written.
Look at this copyright infringing law is essentially the future meeting us. This is the sort of things that people wrote about in times past. And here we are today, facing the challenges of bringing some legislation to this. When you think about it, Leonardo da Vinci drew helicopters. Jules Verne painted submarines. Do you remember the movie The Terminator? I'm sure that you do. The computer system called Skynet that ruled the world. It's like the internet today. And the internet creates so many opportunities, but also with those opportunities come infringements of people's rights. And what this legislation is about is bringing some order to the chaos that surrounds the globe because of technology.
Skynet defense system.
We're in.
Now
Skynet's fully operational, processing at 60 teraflops a second.
Let's
pray to God this works.
Skynet defense system now activated.
The Copyright Infringing File Sharing Amendment Act 2011, dubbed the Skynet Law by New Zealand Press, was passed under urgency to replace the controversial Section 92A. One of the main changes was replacing the term Internet Server Provider with Internet Protocol Address Provider. This change aimed to exclude schools, government departments, and businesses that provide internet access but are not ISPs in the traditional sense, and to focus on the function of ISP that is relevant to infringing file sharing, namely through the provision of Internet Protocol addresses. Under sections 122B to 122U, it allows copyright holders to ask ISPs to send graduated warning notices to customers accused of illegal file sharing by identifying offenders through their Internet Protocol addresses. In other words, this is a system designed for internet pirates to walk the plank. So how does this system work? Step 1. Copyright owners detect an infringement and send the Internet Protocol address to the relevant ISP, which forwards a detection notice to their customer. Step 2. A second infringement between 28 days and 9 months later against the same owner or one represented by a shared body triggers a warning notice. Step 3. A third infringement between 28 days and 9 months later will result in an enforcement notice, and the ISP must forward the customer's details to the Copyright Tribunal if asked to do so by the copyright owner, who then has 5 weeks to decide whether to take action. Internet users can also challenge notices through the ISP, adding an extra step and delaying the process slightly, but notices will stand unless withdrawn by the rights holder. Step 4. The Copyright Tribunal can impose a fine of up to $15,000 after examining written evidence or after a hearing if it is requested. The Copyright Infringing File Sharing Amendment Act also includes a provision that will allow copyright holders to apply to a court for suspension of internet services Again, this law caused controversy, as a United Nations report following the enactment said that disconnecting people from the internet is a human right and is against international law.
Is internet access a human right? That's what a new report from the United Nations argues, put together by Special Rapporteur Frank LaRue. And the report states, the vast potential and benefits of the internet are rooted in its unique characteristics, such as its speed, worldwide reach, and relative anonymity. At the same time, these distinctive features of the internet that enable individuals to disseminate information in, quote, real time and to mobilize people has also created fear amongst governments and the powerful. This has led to increased restrictions on the internet through the use of increasingly sophisticated technologies to block content, monitor and identify activists and critics, criminalization of legitimate expression, and adoption of restrictive legislation to justify those measures. This report specifically says about copyright infringement. I mean, we've seen legislation in Europe, essentially, where they've said that if you're caught downloading something, let's say 3 times, then you can get kicked off the internet entirely. I'm assuming that you probably don't agree with that, but do you think that what the UN here is saying deals specifically with copyright infringement? Are they going into whether you're breaking those types of copyright laws or not?
Yeah, the UN says quite clearly that it is a violation of human rights to take away someone's internet connection just because they've been using it for copyright infringement. And I think that's exactly the right decision. I mean, there's so many issues with the notion of copyright infringement as this kind of serious crime. One is, of course, that everybody does it, you know, and it's hard not to because copyright laws are so complicated. The lines about what's fair use and what's not are so ambiguous. It's very easy to violate copyright law without even knowing that you're doing it, you know. So I think the notion that because this thing that everybody does, that's almost impossible to avoid just the way computers are set up, that is such a bad thing that it should cause people to lose their entire access to the internet. I think the UN is right in saying that that's just ridiculous.
Not to mention, of course, the fact that, like you said, copyright laws are so hard to understand, but they're different in every country. And if the internet is something that's going to be used internationally, then you can't necessarily have just one country say, well, it's my law and I say so, like we're seeing right now.
The UN Human Rights Report was signed by 41 nations. The United Kingdom and France, 2 nations that have enacted 3-strike regimes, did not sign the statement. Interestingly, New Zealand also signed the report. Governing officials later said disconnecting internet would not come into force unless the government considered the warning system ineffective. Justice Minister Simon Powell said that he's very satisfied with the law and will not be looking into changing it.
This is a message to the New Zealand government from Anonymous. We have been watching you for a while now and we are disappointed with many of your decisions. You should know by now that we do not sit around and watch people get their internet freedoms and rights taken away. Due to your new laws stating that if accused with copyright infringement you are guilty until proven innocent and must pay an initial fee of $15,000 and 6 months of internet suspension, we as Anonymous have decided to take action. We have shut down the New Zealand Parliament website at www.parliament.nz. By doing this we are protecting the citizens of New Zealand and sending a message to the government in the form of a protest. Unless the government repeals these laws, Anonymous will continue to take down New Zealand's government websites. New Zealand, you now have our full attention and we will be watching your every move, so it is in your best interest to make laws benefiting your citizens instead of treating them like criminals. This is only the beginning. Unless you make a change to your system of laws, this is your last warning, New Zealand. We suggest you listen to us.
While there have been no future attacks by Anonymous over these matters, New Zealand's copyright law hasn't progressed, while the internet has grown in leaps and bounds. Not only has the internet expanded, but so has the popularity of video sharing websites.
Because technology makes things better. You know, I mean, look at the effects we have in movies today. And look how much cheaper they are today than they were 5 years ago. So in another 10 years down the road, you will be playing super realistic video games, you will be watching movies that will be so much more exciting and cheaper to make than they are now. And you will have artists that are using the latest tools, the latest computers to put their songs out in a day. And I think the evolution is being accelerated by the internet and by technology, and we will see that throughout the entire sphere of entertainment.
Users view more than 1 billion hours of videos each day on YouTube. Section 92C of the Copyright New Technologies Amendment Act governs the liability of ISPs for copyright infringement by website users. One of the functions of this section is to provide safe harbors to ISPs that limits their liability for infringement of users on their websites. One of the problems that arises with Section 92C is that it applies to websites such as YouTube, which have evolved tremendously over recent years, but are still not suitable measures for the internet culture we live in. This results in it having a huge favour for mass media companies as they influence the changes in law and control significant copyrighted properties, unlike small user-generated content creators, which generate most of YouTube's content. Most of New Zealand's popular culture is also influenced by America, and the films watched, the books read, the television shows enjoyed, and the music played. The majority of this content is owned by 4 companies: Comcast, Disney, Viacom, CBS, and AT&T, who own 90% of American news and entertainment. All these companies are represented by 2 lobby groups, the Recording Industry Association of America and the Motion Pictures Association of America. This creates problems for countries like New Zealand, who cannot legally access these medias because of release restrictions.
If you create something, you don't want someone else to go and profit from it. You have your right to make a living and everything. So I respect copyright. What I don't respect is copyright extremism. And what I don't respect is a business model that encourages piracy. See, Hollywood has a business model where they release their product at different times in different markets. In the age of the internet, you can't do that, because if you release a movie in the US first, and then let's say there's someone in New Zealand who is a fan of that actor or has heard about the movie or has seen the trailer, if people then can't find a way to purchase it, and I would think most people would, they then look for an alternative.
Furthermore, YouTube launched an automated digital fingerprint system called Content ID in 2007. The system makes it much easier and more likely for user-generated content to be flagged as infringing, regardless of the context in which it is uploaded. This technology has fundamentally changed the way copyright and fair dealing are managed. The favoritism that arises and the automated system used contradict the constitutional purposes of copyright because they disencourage small users from creating content out of fear of being prosecuted for copyright infringement. This documentary will explore the problems inherited in New Zealand's copyright law and YouTube's Content ID system, given the fact that it is automated and the laws governing copyright favour mass media holders.
Copy! Go right! To the right! Right! It's that law that's the problem. You know the law.
That stupid law.
In order to properly understand where copyright law is today and the significance of the Copyright Amendments Act, it's important to first understand the origins of copyright law in New Zealand. The history of New Zealand's copyright law reflects New Zealand's history as a colony of England. After the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, the British Crown gained the power and influence to create laws in New Zealand. The first New Zealand copyright law was the Copyright Ordinance, enacted in 1842, and was much more limited in scope than today. The exclusive rights afforded to creators were limited to printing, reprinting, publishing, and vending. These rights only lasted for a full term of 28 years, and if the author shall live at the end of that period, for the residue of his natural life. Today the protected list of copyright has expanded tremendously. Copyright is automatic once creation takes a fixed and tangible form. However, for a creator to take legal action against copyright infringers, their creation needs to be copyright registered. New Zealand's list of copyright protected types include music, writing, visual art, movies, computer software, dance choreography, and architecture. A creator's exclusive right to their copyrighted works include the right to reproduce the work in copies, the right to prepare, derive works based on the original, the right to distribute copies of the work, the right to perform the work publicly, and the right to display the work publicly. These rights last for the lifetime of the creator, plus 50 years after the creator's death. The ultimate goal of copyright is to enrich society by encouraging the creation of art and ideas so they can be consumed and built upon. While the exclusive rights granted to creators by copyright protection have been expanded over the years, several limitations of those rights have also been incorporated.
This might sound crazy, but they're
limitations on copyright? Is it possible?
Yes.
Copyright may be broken, but it's
Slippery.
you can
Borrow
a small
amount
of copyright.
One of these limitations is the exception allowing fair dealing of a copyrighted work for criticism, review, and news reporting. Fair dealing, or fair use in some parts of the world, is a key concept in copyright law. It allows any person to use copyrighted material in certain ways where you would otherwise have to seek the permission of the copyright holder. Like all copyright exceptions, fair dealing is the intent to balance a copyright owner's rights to the protection of their work with the public's interest in permitting others to use those works in certain cases. In addition to considering whether a dealing fits within a certain purpose, a court must consider what is fair, depending on the facts of a particular case. There are several factors listed in the Copyright Act that must be taken into account in determining whether copying is fair. The fairness factors are:
Okay, first of all, it's
The nature of the work.
borrowed,
second of all,
It's the
amount
you.
borrowed.
Oh, and there is one more thing. It has to be something that
Doesn't change.
the
original
works value.
in the marketplace.
the determination of fair dealing is often complicated because there is no agreed upon definition of the doctrine, nor are there any bright line rules. Because there are no bright line rules, and the factors are just starting points, judges are left with their own understanding of the doctrine. Inevitably, individual judges consider the factors differently, and each case has to be decided entirely based upon its own facts, making a uniform doctrine impossible to identify by legal professionals, let alone people trying to understand or navigate the applicable copyright law when they upload a video online. Even politicians who help create the law struggle to understand its application.
Eminem's publisher 8 Mile Style is suing the New Zealand National Party for copyright infringement of one of M's most iconic songs, Lose Yourself, which the National Party pretty much ripped off in a 2014 campaign advertisement. Here's Lose Yourself.
Did you capture it? Just let it slip. Yo. His palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy.
And here's the campaign ad.
New Zealand is heading in the right direction. Right now, our economy is growing faster than Australia and 28 other OECD countries.
The ad ran 186 times on TV before being taken down. Proceedings for the suit, which Eminem himself is not a part of, were first filed 3 years ago by 8 Mile Style and started on Monday in Wellington, New Zealand. During day one, it was revealed the National Party was aware of the similarities in the song, but still thought they were in the clear. An email chain among the National Party was brought up in the court that did show some concern for a possible suit, but they ultimately felt protected after purchasing licensing for the sound-alike track on Beatbox Music. As campaign manager for the party, Stephen Joyce put it,
Oh, we think it's pretty legal.
on the sound-alike track's name, Eminem-esque. In court, rep for 8 Mile Style Joe Martin broke down the costs of using Lose Yourself for an advertisement. In the rare occasions that it does happen, with permission and licensing, you're looking at $750,000 to $1 million. Expect an even higher fee if you use the song without authorization. Joe also noted that the National Party would never have been granted permission to use the original work, and that their ad with the use of a Lose Yourself ripoff was bland and perfunctory. Hey, I feel you. The way this courtroom listened to Lose Yourself was bland and perfunctory. Not one head nod. That's the real crime here. Things did rile up a bit when Jeff Bass, who composed the opening guitar riff for Lose Yourself, came in to testify. He called the song used for the National Party's ad, Lose Yourself Light, only it doesn't taste so good. Defense lawyers for the National Party are arguing the musical composition of Lose Yourself isn't particularly original, citing how similar the guitar chord pattern may sound to Led Zeppelin's Kashmir.
Look, if you had...
So in other words, it's okay that we ripped off your song because you may have ripped off other songs first. Interesting defense.
The High Court ruled the similarities between Lose Yourself and the soundtrack used were so strong, it breached copyright. They were ordered to pay $225,000 for copyright infringement. Section 92B to 92D of the Copyright New Technologies Amendment Act outlines Internet Server Provider liability. This title sets the limitation on the liability of ISPs for copyright infringement caused by their users for storage of information and system caching. This documentary will focus on Section 92C and its application to YouTube. Section 92C provides a safe harbor for ISPs' liability of infringing material it stores unless it knows or has reason to believe that the material infringing copyright and does not delete or prevent access to infringing material as soon as possible after becoming aware of it, or the users who infringing material is stored by the ISP is acting on the behalf of or at the direction of the ISP. If these criteria are met, then an ISP is eligible for safe harbor and won't be liable for infringement caused by a third party, resulting in graduated warning notices of the accused. Section 92C retains knowledge standards similar to the DMCA that are presumably intended to lessen an ISP's obligation to monitor information it stores for copyright infringement. This shifts the burden of identifying this material onto copyright holders, who are more able to identify potential infringements of their own copyrighted works.
That there is a law in the US that protects us, which is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, that protects online service providers from actions of their users. And this is the same law that allowed Google to still exist, that allowed YouTube to still exist. You know that Viacom sued YouTube, and YouTube claimed that they are protected by the DMCA, and they won.
One of the most important cases interpreting how safe harbors apply to ISPs is Viacom vs YouTube under the DMCA's Section 512C. This case began in 2007 when Viacom filed suit against YouTube for alleged copyright infringement and sought more than $1 billion in damages. Viacom argued that roughly 160,000 unauthorized clips of Viacom programming had been made available on the popular video sharing website. As to whether YouTube had the right and ability to control the content on its website, the court decided that it did not, because all the algorithms on the website were fully automated and reacted entirely to user input, without any kind of employee involvement.
YouTube is complying to take down this copyrighted content, which they're required to do by copyright laws. These clips are just getting back up there, just as quick as they're being taken down. So this is kind of the viral feature, I think, of user-generated content.
Cases like these have gone a long way in assuring that video sharing websites, like YouTube, are covered by the law. This is great for ISPs and even copyright holders because they are assured of a takedown notification procedure. These cases provide no assurance to users of ISPs, which is a huge problem because those rights get violated every time a video is taken down invalidly. In fact, users and content they generate genuinely have no protection under the current regime.
All of the frustrating automation and algorithms and AI exists so that YouTube can continue to exist. Because if the people working at YouTube officially knew about some of the sketchy stuff on this website, then they probably couldn't be allowed to run it. When it comes to running YouTube, ignorance is not just a hallmark, it's a necessity. In February 2018, representing a total reversal of their prior legal war, Viacom finalized a deal to acquire VidCon, the most coveted YouTube convention in the world. The biggest threat in YouTube's history ended up becoming just another business partner. But hey, it's just business. And you know how the old saying goes, keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
The one thing that's absolutely clear is that there's no way to kill this technology. We can only criminalize its use. We can't stop people from taking culture and remaking it in a way that expresses their ideas differently. We can only drive this creativity underground. We can't make our kids passive in the way we were growing up. We can only make them, quote, pirates. And the question we've got to ask is whether this is any good.
I just ate a hot dog.
Yeah.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
That's an interesting twist.
The widespread presence of user-generated content on the internet has been on the rise for several years now and has become the foundation of video sharing websites like YouTube. As its name suggests, the users of the website create user-generated content, unlike the traditional cultural producers of mass media copyright holders. This kind of content became evident in 2005, and mass media copyright holders are still learning how to react to it, especially as it's becoming very easy to create and share user-generated content. User-generated content can easily be produced with technology and digital softwares in the forms of visual and audio manipulation. These forms of creation have had a valuable contribution to society by providing expressive, political, and entertaining content by giving perspective and reflection of culture.
If you look at the art world, for example, you have Andy Warhol taking photographs and painting them. You have different photographers taking certain scenes and reconstructing them digitally. It all implies a layer of collage and pulling together bits and pieces.
Fact is, look at how any bit of culture is made. Look at how Shakespeare made culture. Look at how every great poet, how Homer made culture. It's about collage. It's about taking bits and pieces of your influences and forging them into something newer and stronger.
Think about the way Walt Disney was created, right? All of Disney's greatest works were taking other people's works and doing something different with them.
Say someone recorded this sound. So does that mean they own it if I go?
If you sample one note of a sound recording, it's copyright infringement.
The biggest issue that mass media producers have with user-generated content is that it often uses pieces of copyrighted works to create something entirely new. Some users create content that is entirely their own, others copy already existing works and then edit them into something new, and then there are those that combine their own material with pre-existing works. This is known as remixing. Most remixers take existing works and reimagine them in new and creative ways, keeping the cultural interest in them alive, and therefore they likely deserve fair dealing protection. It's also nearly impossible for content creators to get permission for each and every piece of copyrighted material if they use a variety in a creation. Given the constitutional purposes of copyright law, one would think that it would embrace user-generated content, considering this content awakens the cultural consciousness and has become an important part of our cultural framework. Unfortunately, this has not been the case.
Someone was just telling me they put little notices on their videos that say no copyright infringement intended, or this is fair use. The problem with saying something's fair use is that a lot of fair use decisions of late have been terrible. So things that should be fair use aren't fair use. So if you know as much about the law as unfortunately I do, I cannot claim ignorance and I cannot claim fair use. And I just have to say, well, I got to make this thing. I got to remix this thing. I got to make this transformative work. I know that I'm infringing copyright, and I don't apologize for it. It's important for me as an artist to make art, and the degree of self-censorship that is required by the law is too great. And in order to, I guess, have integrity as a human being and as an artist, it has come down to, I guess I'm going to be conscientiously violating the law, because there's no way to comply with the law and remain a free human being.
Mass media copyright holders have been at the top of the copyright game for a long time, and many of the additions to copyright protection coverage were made for their benefit. These mass media companies have been favored by the copyright law and see it primarily as a unidirectional model that companies actively create and the public passively consume. The rise of the internet and user-generated content has turned mass media business models on its head, and mass media holders have not been taking it well. User-generated content is based on the opposite philosophy of mass media, and therefore poses a direct threat to mass media copyright holders. For this reason, mass media holders want to limit user-generated content. On the other hand, mass media companies also want to control user-generated content because they recognize it as a means to promote their products. Mass media companies control user-generated content through copyright protection and infringement notices, both because this is how they've controlled it historically and, more importantly, because the current copyright laws lean overwhelmingly in their favor. Over time, some mass media companies began to embrace user-generated content, but they did so very much on their own terms, quickly putting a stop to content that went in a direction they did not like. When mass media companies were still new, and even today, they were able to freely borrow from pre-existing folk culture without anyone to stop them. But when an online user does essentially the same thing with mass media products, those companies are quick to claim copyright protection and halt user creation.
Walt Disney Corporation changed. It's no longer the objective simply to create works and build on the past. Instead, it was also the objective to control Disney works, to make sure others couldn't build upon them.
Now, Disney lawyers have taken aim at this Florida daycare center, saying it has no right to use Disney characters on its walls.
We sample. It's not some feature of what we do. It's all we do. Just totally illegal, insanely illegal, and impossible to clear. It would be impossible to release what we release if you did it through legal channels.
From the older generation, I'm an old man, who seems to understand the way we think. I also make the point here that as a composer, which I am, a song I wrote bought our first house. I support copyright, but only if copyright really has a function of encouraging creativity, an economic incitement or an incentive to create.
Even when the government attempted to update the law in response to the rise of the internet, it never contemplated the existence, let alone the prevalence, of user-generated content. Therefore, the copyright law's main focus was to stop piracy or the direct copying and distribution of copyrighted works. It is entirely unequipped to deal with user-generated content that transforms and reworks copyrighted material into something new. Furthermore, laws only provide safe harbors for ISPs themselves, so creators of user-generated content have no protection where the mass media copyright holders rule and ISP's liability is limited. The lack of protection for users has become even more problematic since YouTube launched its Content ID system. The system monitors everything that is uploaded onto the website and flags any video that has copyrighted content in it, even a video of a child dancing to a song in the background uploaded to YouTube by his mother.
Now to the case of one mother taking on a media giant in court, and it all involves a video she posted on YouTube of her toddler dancing to a Prince song. ABC's Ryan Smith has that story.
It's the kind of video millions of parents post to YouTube every day. But this morning, this video is at the center of a legal battle, pitting Pennsylvania mom Stephanie Lenz against Universal Music Publishing Group.
What do you think of the music?
Universal Music claiming that the tune Baby Holden Lenz is dancing to, Prince's Let's Go Crazy, is protected by copyright laws, and that Stephanie Lenz violated the copyright when she posted this 29-second video to YouTube in 2007. The music powerhouse demanded YouTube pull it down. Lenz spoke to ABC about the takedown soon after.
I didn't like being accused of something that I didn't do.
So the Pennsylvania mother sued Universal, claiming the company did not factor in her rights to fair use the song before demanding YouTube take the video down. And on Monday, a federal appeals court sided with Lenz, upholding her lawsuit and ruling Universal should have considered Lenz's rights first. For Good Morning America, Ryan Smith, ABC News, New York.
Lenz established the proposition that copyright holders actually have to look through every video that is flagged with copyrighted content before sending a takedown notification, which is practically impossible. However, it is also an example of a successful use of a counter notification system by an online user. Although Lens successfully used the counter notification process and actually pursued a suit against Universal Music Corp, this is typically not the case because most users do not know about the system, do not know about their rights under copyright law, or are too scared to pursue a lawsuit against a mass media corporation. This is especially true in the current climate, where increasing numbers of ISPs are using automated infringement filters to flag uploads.
Content ID is YouTube's unique software system that was built to help content owners find copies of their work on YouTube. Content ID also gives them options beyond taking down copies, which in turn allows YouTube creators around the world to share creative ideas through fan videos that may include others' original content. Here's how Content ID works. First, content owners give us audio or visual reference files that identify their works. Our Content ID database creates what is known as a fingerprint from these files. We keep these fingerprints in a database of hundreds of years of audio and visual content. Content ID scans videos on YouTube against these fingerprints to see if there's a match. Thanks to these fingerprints, Content ID can recognize audio, video, and even melodies when they've been covered or imitated. When the system finds a match between the audio or visual reference files and a video on YouTube, the content owner has 3 options. They can block the video that matched their content, they can monetize the video, or they can track viewer data to get detailed analytics, such as countries where their content is popular. To date, content owners have claimed hundreds of millions of videos through Content ID. More often than not, content owners choose to earn revenue from the ads run against claimed videos. As a result, Content ID has paid out billions of dollars in revenue to content owners since it was first created in 2007. We've also worked hard to make the system fair for creators. That's why we've made it easy for creators to dispute claims when they believe they're made in error.
Content ID is a great system for YouTube and for copyright holders, but it's not so great for YouTube users because it not only fails to protect them, but also effectively deprives them of their rights under fair dealing law. The system is incapable of recognizing fair dealing, which means that a lot of videos are flagged as infringing when they are not. Furthermore, when these videos are flagged, most users fail to dispute the claims made against them because they're either unaware of their rights under copyright law, are afraid to actually be sued for infringement, or both. Threats of infringement action can be used as a means of damaging a competitor through the use of bully tactics. It's actually unlikely for a mass media copyright holder to go to the extent of suing for an infringing YouTube video, due to it costing a lot of money and time, as well as it being impossible to address every infringing video, which is another reason why Content ID exists. In addition to fair dealing problems that arises with a system like Content ID, the monetization of videos also deprives users of their rights, because for some cases, the monetization is not proportional to the amount of copyrighted content used.
Totally willing to pay them their percentage, but they're taking all of it.
What do we do?
When a video gets monetized on YouTube, ads run in front of the video, at the start, during, or the end. The profits from monetization are split between the copyright holder and YouTube itself, leaving nothing for the content creator, even if the majority of the video is not infringing. In addition, when a copyright holder chooses to do this, the whole video is monetized, without respect to how much copyrighted content is actually in the video. If multiple valid copyright holders monetize the video, revenue is divided by the number of claims. Therefore, the user who uploaded the video gets absolutely nothing and is deprived of their rights to the original materials or transformative works that is used in the video.
The entire monetizable portion of an audiovisual work is now being used to claim 100% of the money of that audiovisual work.
YouTube has made it easier for content creators to remove copyrighted content with their video editing system, but this could take away vital information that is needed for videos. Even if the user does not want to financially benefit from the video, monetization is in the favor of the copyright holder and results in copyright holders benefiting from more than just their copyrighted work.
Machine learning algorithms are permeating our technology, so it's important to understand how they work and how they affect your well-being. I'm going to show you an experiment I have been running with YouTube's Content ID algorithm. I've been deliberately pushing it to see what triggers it and how this thing works.
People go to great lengths to circumvent copyright measures, something they beat in Content ID, when in fact, they've uploaded content that Content ID wasn't looking for.
Before I go on, I want to make it very clear that this is not for the purpose of doing anything illegal. My videos are fair use, and the only reason I do this is because it makes things easier. If a video gets flagged by the Content ID system, you can dispute it, but you won't be able to monetize it for the first month or so, and it's a really broken system, as I've said before, so it's easier to just avoid it altogether if possible.
Adversarial attacks on YouTube's copyright system is one way to evade copyright detection. It's a bit of a cat and mouse situation, as YouTube's Content ID system continues to evolve and becomes better at detecting copyright. The purpose of an adversarial attack on copyright detection systems is to test the limitations and operations of these system algorithms.
Just like meteorologists try to predict the weather and get it wrong, the algorithm might make wrong predictions about whether this contains copyrighted content.
One YouTuber called Cybercat gives examples of how adversarial attacks can be made visually. She states by doing this, it removes the hassle of added conflict between YouTubers and copyright holders, especially if a dispute is rejected.
The main thing I do is that I try to keep clips under 10 seconds. Sometimes that can be hard if a scene I want to show has a lot of dramatic pauses. In those cases, what I try to do is cut out some of those pauses, and occasionally if the character is being overly wordy or redundant, I'll cut down what they're saying, so only the most important part is there. Anyway, probably the only good thing about this system is that if a video does get tagged, it'll usually give you a couple of timestamps showing what part of the video was problematic. So what I'll do then is go back to my video and add markers to remind me of what part I need to edit. Then I generally go in and zoom in further on a character's face in every other shot or so. Honestly, I don't really like to do this, mainly because at times I've had to zoom in so tight on a character's face that it ends up looking kind of bad. Before I joined a network and YouTube was really being a pain in the ass, I was having to do things like switch the video to black and white before it would stop detecting it, and I really hated to do crap like that. But again, that is something you can technically do. Other people have had some success with mirroring the image. I don't like to do that because if there's ever text on the screen, it's going to be backwards, and I feel that's just taking it too far. I just think it would be distracting, but if you don't care about that, feel free to do it if you think you need to.
Mark Power, another YouTuber, did a test on YouTube's Content ID system to work out the detection length of their algorithms. He did this by testing 23 songs through the system, with each song at 10 seconds or under, with the same video clip of him dancing.
We can upload different content to try and test the Content ID algorithm and see what affects its predictions. Under these conditions, Content ID flagged 43% of songs as violating copyright. Keep in mind, I am violating 100% of these songs' copyright. It's the same case for all of these, but it only flags it for 43% of them, which already shows us the weaknesses of machine learning algorithms. Sometimes they make bad predictions. But it gets worse. If you're a foreign song, only 30% of those songs were identified by Content ID. And some of the songs we chose were pretty popular songs, so it seems like foreign artists are at a disadvantage. It did the song. So we started with 10 seconds and 43% of clips were identified as copyright violations. When we moved it to 9 seconds, nothing changed. All of the songs that were flagged were still flagged. None of the ones that weren't flagged all of a sudden came up. When we moved it to 8 seconds, half of the songs dropped off. We only had about 21% of songs identified as copyright violations. Then when we got to 7 seconds, only one song was seen as a copyright violation at 7 seconds. And then at 6 seconds, not a single song was identified. Which might lead us to conclude that YouTube is actually allowing 6 seconds of copyrighted content on videos without it being a conflict.
This documentary made adversarial attacks on YouTube's Content ID system to bypass detection and avoid copyright disputes. One could agree this is a fair approach, as it utilizes fair dealing with copyrighted materials under criticism and review of copyright. There were multiple Content ID claims when the draft versions of this documentary were uploaded. One of the first Content ID claims was for the Peter Pan reference, and this claim was made by Sony Pictures, Universal Pictures, and Nan Films. For this section, a range of techniques mentioned by Cybercat were tested, such as zooming in, black and white, mirroring, and even new methods of warping, tilting, and 360 rotation. None of these methods worked when re-uploaded. The method that did work, however, was by adding pauses and cutting up the footage. This is seen in the final version. Another Content ID claim was for the Terminator reference. For this adversarial attack, every 10 seconds were cut out and the remaining footage was combined together, which successfully bypassed the system. One could believe that these successful methods worked, as Content ID didn't have enough time to predict the matches. The original versions, as well as the scenes used, have been uploaded for reference and comparison of how this was done. For another Content ID claim, a different approach was taken. This claim was for the audio used in this clip, which outlines another issue with YouTube's Content ID system. This audio was claimed for a soundtrack created by Poncho Trackman, a Brazilian beat producer who sampled the audio in a song. This is a conflicting issue because this is from an open source documentary called RIP, a Remix Manifesto. The director Gala encourages people to create their own remixes of the movie.
So take this movie, rip it, remix it, and help remake it.
The documentary is also under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial 3.0 license. Under this Creative Commons license, his entire documentary is available for downloading, remixing, and sharing for non-commercial uses. For this reason, the claim was disputed as an invalid claim. This endured a 4-step process. The first step confirmed eligibility. The second step confirmed the dispute type, in this case being license. The third step involved reviewing requirements, and the final step involved giving a rationale. The claim went to CD Baby, Poncho Trackman's music distributor, who was given 30 days to review the claim. After 14 days, the dispute was accepted and the copyright limitations were released from all draft and future uploads of this material. This shows the importance of understanding copyright for successfully disputing claims. There is also another way to deal with Content ID, and this involves joining the system.
Today I'm going to teach you how to monetize your videos by abusing YouTube's own copyright claim system. Don't qualify to monetize your video? Claim it. Did your video get false claimed by a big music corporation? Two can play at that game. Claim it. Want to upload actual stolen content and get paid for it? Claim it. Actually, don't do that. I promise this isn't a gimmick for views, it's just how broken YouTube is right now.
YouTube does not mediate copyright disputes.
There is an enormous problem right now with people and corporations unlawfully and religiously claiming works that were made fully legally by YouTube channels.
I've had literally 2-second screen clip claiming all the revenue of the video without saying what caused it.
This video is claimed by Living On by Pascal, whoever that guy is. Didn't use a beat or anything, we just sung the song. I don't think that's claimable, but whatever.
I don't play even a microsecond of the song. Some mother went in and manually claimed this video.
So first they give away my video to some random company just because they say they own it. Oh yeah, but it's not our problem anymore. We don't get involved.
Yeah, it just feels like YouTube don't want to comment on the issue. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to even acknowledge it.
And since YouTube doesn't want to go in between of it, these companies abuse this power.
You, the YouTuber, are going to lose a lot of the time if you try to dispute these claims.
These false claims that come in, these claims that have absolutely no grounding whatsoever, they're just automated, they get shot in. There's no repercussions to the claimant when they make a false claim.
The claimant gets to review the dispute. The guy who wants to have my song, he gets to decide if he actually owns my song. Awesome.
There should be some form of repercussions for the fact that a company has just levied 400 claims onto a YouTube channel, blanket across the board. They just go, oh sorry, yeah, we made a mistake. I guess it is yours, don't worry about it, we'll move on.
This is not a problem that is unique to me at all. This is a huge site-wide problem.
This system has to change.
It's not fair more than anything. YouTube's Content ID system is totally skewed towards the people who are making the claims.
Mainly with the music companies.
If company claims your video, you can appeal it, but it's basically up to that company to then say yes or no. And of course they're gonna abuse that power, of course.
They have a lot of power on YouTube, and YouTube doesn't really do much to stop them.
The people who don't have massive teams of lawyers behind them, things like that, are kind of the ones that get pushed and shoved around a little bit.
YouTube can't intervene in every copyright issue. It's a matter of resources. I get that. They just can't hire that many people. So YouTube has what's called the Content ID system. And for larger creators and large music companies, YouTube will give access to the Content ID system. system. Now say for instance you're a smaller music creator. If someone stole one of your songs and re-uploaded it to YouTube, you actually wouldn't be able to claim monetization on the video. Your only option is to file a takedown notice, unless you're signed with a distribution company. Here's how it works. You create a song or album, you pay a music distribution service like CD Baby, which is the one that I used for Tryhard's Paradise, and they distribute your music to iTunes, Spotify, whatever. They also usually take a small cut per song sold, but the interesting thing is that that's how you can get your song into the Content ID system. Now say they own the exclusive rights to it, they can sign up with a music company, get their song into the Content ID system, and for the rest of their YouTube career, they can use that song as their outro and get their video monetized without qualifying for the YouTube Partner Program. Instead of complaining about these music companies stealing my videos, I'll join the music companies and claim my own videos. I guess the cliche is, if you can't beat them, join them. Can't believe I haven't thought of this before. Sounds pretty great, right? Except for, I could upload the entirety of, say, Taylor Swift's new album, followed by my own outro song, and although that would be completely illegal and would definitely be stealing, I would still earn 50% of the revenue. Oh wait, that's what the music companies are doing. Obviously there's good applications to this and bad ones. With that said, I hope you use your best judgment with this knowledge.
Intellectual property is an important part of our economy, and the problem is that most of the rules are based on physical copies of things, and so a lot of the practices were appropriate for paper prevent people from reproducing copies of paper or DVDs and so on. Didn't work very well in a digital environment where it's easy to replicate and distribute.
New Zealand's Ministry of Business and Innovation initiated the review of the Copyright Act in November 2018 and closed consultation of their review in April 2019 after seeking feedback on how well the law is working, with Internet NZ among those submitting on several aspects, the conclusion being the Skynet law hasn't been used in years, is dysfunctional, and looks to be made almost completely redundant. Following the Skynet law enactment, a handful of cases were brought to tribunal, almost all of them by the Recording Association of New Zealand, which is now Recorded Music NZ. In Recorded Music NZ's 2017 response to the review's terms of reference, they elaborated on many problems they faced while under the regime. Notice requests sent to ISPs were lost, thrown away, or invalidated by technicalities. Reward orders by the tribunal were disproportionate to the crimes, with little more than a slap on the wrist, and decisions took months to be released, in one case up to 329 days. New Zealand Federation Against Copyright Theft, NZ-FACT, renamed the Australia-New Zealand Screen Association, which is owned by the United States Motion Pictures Association and represents television and movie distribution, decided against asking internet providers to issue infringement notices to customers on its behalf. That is because of the $25 fee they must pay internet providers to issue each notice. There is also an additional $200 fee to bring a case before the tribunal. Internet NZ Engagement Director Andrew Cushion said, New Zealand's copyright law around file sharing has been made completely irrelevant and unused. Since late 2015, ISPs do not appear to have been requested by copyright owners to send any notices to their account holders. The last claim to be taken to the Copyright Tribunal was also in 2015. Mr. Cushion further said, in short, the file sharing framework is not used because it is not relevant. Even the distributors who pushed for the law changes in 2011 have moved on. This is most likely with the rise of streaming platforms such as Netflix and Spotify, where users pay a monthly subscription for a library of content, guaranteeing copyright owners are paid for their productions. While YouTube's system isn't perfect, it is still providing the ability for most YouTubers to express their voice publicly, and the system is still managing to function under current copyright regimes. While the future of New Zealand's copyright law calls for a serious reform, and it's been over 10 years since major changes were made, it's clear the current law is too problematic and isn't functioning in many areas for copyright holders and users of copyrighted works. A balance needs to be found that works for people exercising creative skills, people pushing technology, and the rest of society as well. New Zealand Consumer Affairs Minister Jackie Dean stated the copyright law, especially in the digital area, is highly complex and has warned that the government will not be able to resolve all issues to everyone's satisfaction. The internet, however, will continue to shape the way we think, and this cannot be stopped but should be embraced, as it's becoming more part of our lives. User-generated content will continue to be uploaded to the internet, regardless of regulations, through loopholes, while streaming services are becoming the norm for media accesses. Which leads me to my final point. The future is built upon the past, and nothing is original but a remix. Everything mankind creates takes inspiration from something that has become before. Originality doesn't really exist. People simply rework what already exists in their own way.
I teach about copyright law, and it is so incredibly convoluted. The joke is that even those that are copyright professors can barely understand the inner workings of it. So it needs to be vastly overhauled.
It's just like barnacles on a ship. You know, you start out with a ship that's going lickety-split, right? And then you get a barnacle on it and it slows it down. The law is like that because you have a case, you get case law, it establishes barnacles on the original legislation until finally you have a barnacle-encrusted legislation that nobody understands. So the end result of all this is a serious need for the geeks and the legislators and the people who create intellectual property to sit down and look at the world as it is now and say, what should we do to make sure that there is an opportunity for remuneration if it is desired? Some people create information for the sheer joy of knowing that somebody else finds it useful. That's what the World Wide Web taught us. That's what the Creative Commons is about, which is an alternative, more extended version of copyright, in effect. So we have opportunities here to transform the way.
Actually, I want to move on to